Walking down this path over here, this is Leucothoe axillaris, and I think I mentioned last time, I'm not sure the cultivar, but I do want to cut it back. You know, once it finishes blooming, I'll just kind of thin it out. Like, it's a little bit high over here, and it's a little bit high over here, and I'd love to take it back from the walkway a little bit. But my goal, you know, like so many people would be like, I need to cut this back. Let me grab a pair of hedge clippers and just round it off and make everything tiny. And I don't want to do that. I want it to still be natural. I just want it to be smaller. So I'm going to selectively prune this, and it's going to take a while. And I have to admit, even though I theoretically know what I'm doing, it sometimes gets frustrating selectively pruning, where you take hand pruners and get in there. And is that a hummingbird moth? You see that? Is that a hummingbird moth? Sometimes I can be distracted. So you know, I was saying that selectively pruning initially can take longer, or like I haven't pruned this Leucothoe probably in 5 or 6 years, so it's going to take a while. But when I'm done, you won't even be able to tell I pruned. And I would be so frustrated if I came out to my garden and just saw this mound, you know, of tightly sheared Leucothoe. That's not the idea of this shrub. This is the way Leucothoe is supposed to look. So, you know, take the time. And the cool thing about selective pruning is, you know, you don't have to do it all like in June, because if you selectively prune, your shrubs have such variety to their heights that you can kind of do a little bit at a time through the year. Asterisk with the exception of flowering shrubs, which you really need to prune right after they bloom. Leucothoe is not really grown for the flowers, so if we lose a few, that's okay. And then over here, the daffodils are continuing to you know, go dormant, still green, not even close to time to rip the foliage off. I've got, I think this might be Astilbe chinensis, but I'm not really sure. But I've got some Astilbe over here that's kind of been trampled through the winter because the walkway's been, the reason there's a wheelbarrow full of mulch over there for the last 3 videos is because that mulch is supposed to be on this pathway, but I just haven't gotten time to it. But every time it rains, I get like an inch or 2 of water on this pathway. So then I sneak around and walk on top of the Astilbe, which isn't good. So I want to get that mulch down as my pathway through here. Actea pachypoda because it's white. This is meadow rue, and you'll notice a lot of the plants, you know, when I'm working in the gardens, I'll see a lot of chipmunk holes. I mean, there's one here, and then there's one over here as well. They usually come in 2s. So if you see one chipmunk hole, there's usually one within a few feet to 5 to 6 feet. But, you know, so they have 2 exits. But they've been, the population's been exploding because I've been feeding the birds and the chipmunks and the squirrels and, you know, God knows what else. But, you know, I fill these feeders daily. This is Viburnum dentatum, Arrowwood Viburnum. Flowers are coming. It's a native. I'm not really sure if I would recognize it in the woods. It doesn't look like this in the woods, that's for sure. But this is going to eventually just turn into a mess of sticks, which will hopefully keep the hawks from getting the birds. And as far as the location of my feeders goes, notice how close I am to the woods. So when I mow my lawn, you know, every week or 2, I can just take the blower and just blow all the bad seed into the woods. And it's not going to, number 1, start growing under there, but number 2, it just looks a little bit neater. As you're looking at the backyard here, when I'm mowing this, so again, deep shade, 2 maple trees, more maple trees over there. It's deep shade. So what I'm trying this year is I've got my mower to the point where I don't even lower my blades when I'm mowing the grass back here. I just keep the blades all the way up and figure I'd rather have something green and neat than something short and, you know, with dirt sticking through. So the taller you mow your lawn, the deeper the roots can go looking for water. And that's what I've been trying to do. As long as you mow on a regular basis, you know, every week, this time of the year, every, you know, 2 times a week, mowing tall is a perfectly fine option. So we're gonna see what happens. All right, so this bed, I made some changes or improvements, but I've still got a lot more to go. So the first thing I did was I planted this viburnum here. This is a Juddi Viburnum. So that Juddi Viburnum was growing in the bed over there. And I had just one, so I brought over here. Another thing I did is there was a PG hydrangea on a standard, you know, just like a pole with some foliage on top at the center of this bed. And I just got rid of that. That had been there for like 3 years. Never really did anything, so I just decided it was time to call it quits on that one. A little too shady for a PG hydrangea back here. While I was back here, if you go to the last garden tour video, this is Epimedium sulphureum. This was just one clump. So what I did is I broke the clump up and separated it, so it's now more or less like a big swath. And this is another plant that you wouldn't believe how dense the foliage, the roots were. So I really had to step on the spade to break it up. And Epimedium is supposed to be great for deep shade, and it is. And hopefully this, within a year or two, is going to just be one big patch of Epimedium sulphureum. And then what I did is there were a couple of these Paris, I think it's Heuchera or Heuchera, but there were a couple of these Paris, and I mentioned in the last video that they're really, really beautiful in bloom. You know, we're in a pretty shady spot, and I did lose a few, but not enough to be concerned that I would consider planting some more. But what I'm thinking for this bed is, you know, so I moved a couple, when I divided everything, I moved a couple of these Paris this way. But my thought is to, at some point, take all these and maybe move them over there and get a few more. And then this Lamiastrum gallopedolin Herman's Pride. So maybe I get like a few more of these Herman's Pride and fill in over here. And then there's an Epimedium, which I believe is Roseum, which I could put over here. And even where these, I just put these 2 Hellebores as a holding spot. You know, so I could do some Herman's Pride in here because the Herman's Pride has done okay. Then I do some Epimedium Roseum over here. And then I move the Paris over there. And then maybe these 2 go over there. I don't know yet. And then the Cimicifuga. This Cimicifuga does really well every year. So my thought is I'll take the Cimicifuga fairy candles. It gets about 4 or 5 feet tall when it's in bloom, more like 4. I'll take the Cimicifuga and I'll work that to the center of the bed, so that's the high point. That may be just enough to finish this off. And I'm not really looking for, you know, the cover of House and Garden magazine here, but just as long as it looks nice, that's really all I need. Looks nice, stays alive through the summer. See this robin? It's got something in its mouth. It's a robin in 5-inch tall grass. And then there's a shot of the feeder with the purple finches. Their population is just exploding, or I just never noticed them before this year, one of those 2. And a gray squirrel. Their population's doing okay too. You hear that bird in the distance? You hear that? So I was making a video or watching a video I made years ago, and somebody said that's something called a woodland thrush. It's a little brown bird. It's like halfway between a sparrow and a robin, closer to a sparrow, but I see it bopping around every once in a while. But I just love that noise. So this bed as well, when I started working yesterday, I've got a chipmunk hole here, and then there's a chipmunk hole over there, and then there's a third chipmunk hole, which doesn't really make sense to me. But one thing I've noticed is whenever I work in the garden, the animals will quite often come and start digging. I think it's the squirrels trying to bury stuff. So wherever I dig, they come back and try to put their nuts or whatever wherever I'm digging. Okay, so here's a double. Look at the size of this one. So there's a pretty good sized chipmunk. I mean, their population's taken off, that's for sure. So this is dwarf goat's beard here. And my thought is I can divide this. I can definitely get at least 3 plants out of this big one and at least 2 out of the small one. But I'll divide this and just use this more of a filler to fill in this area a little bit. And the more years I garden, it's like less is more, because I've noticed plants always grow bigger, so I'm okay with a little bit of space between plants and letting them fill in, because I know within 5 years I'm going to be moving them anyways. When I plant now, I'm more strategic, because I just look at my beds. I don't look at the beds how they look when I plant them. I say, well, how's this going to look in 5 years? How's this going to look in 10 years? And when I look into the future, I'm like, oh my God, that's overplanted. So now I'm happier to leave some space between things than to just try to fill every last inch of garden. This is Rudbeckia. It's a herbstone Rudbeckia. It'll get to be like 6 feet tall. And one thing you can do with your Rudbeckias and your purple cone flowers and some other perennials, we'll talk about it as well, is if you just come in, these are the flower stalks, but if I just come in and cut these in half, that's going to do 2 things. The first thing that's going to happen is when it does bloom, they're going to be shorter, so they're going to be less likely to flop over. But the second thing it's going to do is it's going to make them bloom a little bit later. So like on this plant, I could cut half of it back and leave half of it tall, and just cut the front half. Maybe that's what I'll do. Just cut the front half shorter, but leave the back half without being cut. And then the back half will bloom earlier and be taller, and the front half will bloom later and be shorter. So you can kind of stage things. And the closer you cut something to the time it's going to bloom, the more of a delay you're going to create. So, you have to be careful not to cut something like right before it's going to bloom late in the summer, because it won't have time to regrow the flowers. But that's something to just keep in mind. So then we've got the poppies here. So this is where the Centaurea was and the Stokes Aster was, which I moved over by that stump. This is a poppy, which I'm not sure which one. If I can find a tag, I'll let you know, but they were open wide in the morning, but I guess it's getting later in the day. The poppies really want to be in full sun. It's a little bit too shady here, and you can kind of see how they're reaching for the light and they're getting knocked over. So when you think of poppies, think of full sun. One thing I did over the last few days was to plant and transplant the swamp milkweed through here. So this is swamp milkweed, and that's swamp milkweed. And I had some growing in the garden over there. There was a couple more over here. And then there's like this one here I got at their Bartlett Arboretum plant sale. But when I was out planting 2 days ago, it had just rained, and it was kind of like a light rain. If you're ever out in like a light rain or right after a rainstorm or during a rainstorm, it's a great time to plant, because there's no sun on the plants. They're instantly given water, and it's like a perfect scenario, and usually the ground is wet too. So if it's ever raining out, what a great time to like divide perennials or transplant perennials or put new plantings in. I mean, you don't want to work the soil, you know, as far as grading goes, but to just dig a hole and stick something in the ground or divide something, rainy days are great for that. But when I was out, you know, it was raining and I could see the water coming out here and running down, and it was actually running a few feet past the rocks here. So what I decided to do was I just put the rocks in to kind of stop it up, and I put the swamp milkweed in here. So now every time it rains, it's going to basically just soak up all that water. And I have one swamp milkweed over by the shed, which is in dry, you know, shade, but I think they're really going to thrive a lot more over here. And I really want to encourage the butterflies. So we'll see how that works out. And then this here is purple coneflower alley. This here is purple coneflower, which also will get, I'll get some butterflies on. Ellie, we don't need that. We don't need that. This purple coneflower could probably be divided as well. And then this back here is actually Itea, and that, it's just coming into bloom, so it's early June, and so Itea in zone 6 blooms in early June, and then it's got a really nice fall color. But this has been here for a while. As soon as the flowers fade away, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it all back to the ground, which I already did. You see these suckers coming earlier in the year, and we'll just let it resprout. And then working our way down here, I still have my butterfly waterer, which I have yet to see a butterfly in. I put some apples in it, and I did see a chipmunk steal some apples. Maybe it's early for butterflies. I saw a yellow one today, not around here, but we're just gonna keep trying and see what happens. And then I did cut back, this is my Agastache. So I transplanted, this one here was actually growing over there, but it was, the Mount Laurel grew farther out, so it was gonna bump into this, so I just went ahead and transplanted it, gave it some water, and then last year these got to be like 5 to 6 feet tall, so I figure I would just go ahead and cut them back. This is catmint back here, and this one over there was actually growing somewhere, maybe it was over there, I'm not sure. I transplanted it, and when I transplanted it, it was a really sunny day, and it almost immediately wilted. So I decided to go ahead and cut that one back too, because by cutting them back, we're reducing the amount of foliage, so that way there's less chance of losing water. And then also in this garden, this is bee balm, which I believe is Jacob Klein, and I cut this back as well because this usually ends up growing way too tall and flopping over. So we cut the Jacob Klein back, and then this is some of the catmint, which I just put on this rock to let dry out, and then maybe I'll let the cats, let the cats have fun with it. The interesting thing with this catmint is, initially I planted one somewhere in the yard, and then I found seedlings in the yard, and this catmint is very upright growing. It turns out that I guess catmint kind of wants to be an upright grower. Hybridizers select the ones that grow, lower. So, a very common cultivar is Walker's Low. It's pretty much the only one I know. And I look at, the catmint I had here, and I was like, why is this catmint, growing straight up? I thought catmint, grew more prostate. And the reason is because the hybridizers have been selecting, the more prostrate forms, but spreading forms. But the reason is the growers have been selecting the more spreading forms because you don't want this big hunk of foliage in the garden. That just kind of occurred to me. But catmint is another one that to me would be more hot, dry. It's going to do great. The more sun, the better. I don't want to say super dry, but I think it'll tolerate super dry once it's established. I did get my honeysuckle in here. This is Major Wheeler, and this is Major Wheeler. And then these 4 back here are also Major Wheeler. And then this is another catmint that I transplanted. And I'm not sure if that's a baby catmint or not. That's why I left it. I did plant the Aquilegia canadensis There's some here. I put one here, and then I made this one grouping in here. We'll see if it grows or not. But there's really nothing wrong with these ones that are here now. And if they're happy, but if I can get some of this Aquilegia canadensis with that nice red flower, that would be really cool. And I also just want you to notice this one patch. You see all these seedlings down here? That's not clover, that's actually baby columbine coming up. So you got to be careful if you're looking, if you're looking to expand your garden. You got to be careful and see if you can, let some of the seedlings grow you want to grow, which can be tricky because if you got someone new on the crew, or basically anybody but the person who knows what's what, it's very easy to remove seedlings. And I did put the rocks around that. When it was raining, the rain drips like right onto the blocks here and creates a splash pattern. So I put these rocks here just to kind of see if that would help keep the soil where it needs to be and maybe catch some of the water. For what it's worth, while I was rambling on about something, the hummingbird did come and try to get something here, and then it flew up into the apple tree. So hummingbird feeders, basically just take some lukewarm water, 1 cup of lukewarm water, a 1/4 cup of just granulated sugar, stir it vigorously until it all blends together. Rinse out your old hummingbird feeder, really well. There's going to be ants in it, so rinse it out with the hose outside. Get the ants out, then take it inside and give it a good rinsing. Once a week. You want to do this once a week, and then refill it with the warm sugar water and put it back out. You don't need to use any dyes. You don't need any fancy store-bought mixture. But once a week, you want to change it. You want to rinse it out really well. If you had like a nylon bottle brush, I ended up buying one to get some of the junk out of there. Do that, but give it a good washing, and just change it once a week, and you're going to get them. It really is that easy. But hummingbirds are territorial, so you'll usually only get a male and a female. Like here in Connecticut, I've never seen more than one at a time, or if I see one male at the feeder and another male comes, one of them will chase the other one away. So, they are territorial little guys. And then over here, this is a mountain laurel, and when we bought this house, there was a hemlock, probably right where the edge of this garden is, that was over the top of the house, and this hemlock was growing underneath. At some point, we had to redo the well, which is behind these boxwood, so I had to dig a trench for that well, and I literally picked this mountain laurel up, put it in the backyard in the shade for a few days, brought it back, stuck it in here, and I mean, it's been with us for 20 years, and it was probably easily 15 to 20 years old when we moved into the house. And all I do with this guy is I selectively prune. With your mountain laurel, you want to either rake or blow all those leaves out from underneath it, because if there's any disease, mountain laurel are quite often susceptible to leaf diseases. I'm not sure if this is a leaf spot disease, like a fungal leaf spot disease, or if this is just last year's leaves falling off. But you just want to either blow or rake all those leaves out, dispose of them, away from your normal compost pile, and then let them do their thing. The only other thing I do is I do try to get in and selectively prune and let them create some airflow through the shrub. We haven't sprayed any fungicides on this mountain laurel, and it looks this good. And I never will spray any fungicides on this mountain laurel. Not really sure what's going on over here. It's like got this one spot with a little bit more dense foliage. Where this branch goes back, and I made some cuts last year in there. So the reason there's more growth here is because there used to be branches going over this way, but there's so much more energy now that it's actually putting that energy into growing new shoots, as opposed to, so it's basically got like 1/3 the branches on this one larger branch, so it's putting all that energy into throwing more foliage. as opposed to new shoots. That's my theory. And then down here, these are toad lily, which I'm experimenting with. I usually see them natively in shady areas where it can be pretty dry, so I think they're going to do okay over here. But I did transplant. The two larger ones were actually growing behind the house in the hosta garden, and they actually seemed like they were doing better back there than the ones that were here. So we'll see how things go. These two are growing so aggressively, I almost wonder if my toad lily is going to end up being a garden thug. Hopefully not. While I was out this weekend, I did get a chance to go through and pick the baby maple seedlings out of this Allium glauca here, and I also picked them out of the Waldistinia, so that's looking a lot better. And I also divided, I'm not sure which Astilbe this is, but I basically divided all the plants in here and separated them just to give a little bit more plants and make the clump bigger. You know, sometimes when you're in a garden, if you see like a perennial that the clump has gotten huge, it won't be as vigorous. So you kind of want to divide them to make them more vigorous. So I'm kind of hoping that this is going to encourage them to grow a little faster and be a little more vigorous and give me more flowers. But unfortunately, I'm right underneath the crabapple, deep shade, dry shade. We'll see what happens. And then I did get, these are two summer snowflake viburnums I got in, and you can see they're kind of droopy today, so I do need to give them some water. And then this is Viburnum Burkwoodii, which, you know, we'll see what happens. And again, just notice how somebody's been digging around the base of the plant there. Somebody's been digging around the base of the plant there. I don't know why, but it's like these animals watch me in the garden and come back and start digging wherever I was digging.